Can't you just feel the excitement in the air with big bucks like this? I'll tell you, this is going to be the most fantastic big buck night ever. You know, the antlers on a deer, what is this all about? Why do we make a celebration out of it like this in a 1-hour special on public TV? Well, I tell you, the antlers are something that are exciting to see on a whitetail deer. They're exciting to see in the woods. They're exciting to see on the wall. They're exciting to see right here on Big Buck Night. But virtually every hunter in the woods in the fall is after venison. They'd be happy with a deer or a buck or even a small buck to put some meat in the freezer and enjoy those great recipes that we do. That's what deer hunting is about for most hunters. But we stumble upon these big racks that we want to see, and we have some doozies. Now, a lot of people have asked me, what about this year? You know, records have been set all over the Midwest for deer hunting. It seems to happen year after year now, with the deer herds just burgeoning year after year. How have the racks been? Before I answer that, let's take a look at what we have to compare to last year. Our 1988 Big Buck of the Year, Fred Hood took this one down in southern Michigan. Hear his story.
Opening morning, still pretty dark at 7 o'clock. My watch just beeped 7 o'clock. I was just sitting there admiring the creation and being thankful for the opportunity to be out in the woods and looking around at the birds and really enjoying myself. And I caught a little motion over my left shoulder, and he was coming from the direction I thought he would be coming from.
Why did you think he would be coming from there?
It was a fence row, north-south fence row, and had some pine trees along, and he had probably 10 or 12 pine trees rubbed up. And about a quarter mile behind me, there was a big scrape. I mean, a big scrape.
A big one.
A big scrape. Broken branches above, you know, just textbook scrape. And I knew he'd either be coming out of the woods to the scrape or from the scrape to the woods.
And you were in between?
I was in between.
Of course, let's talk about your track record. Last year, same blind.
Same blind, 9-point, opening day, 1:30 in the afternoon.
That was
Run right out across the open winter wheat field, right to me. Shot him at 20 yards.
And this one?
44 yards. I stepped it off. Came down the fence row, stepped out into the winter wheat field, and I shot him. Ran about 70 yards.
Now, Fred Jr., here to make the third Fred on the set, is holding this rack, and he didn't get that, did he?
No, that's my buck from Thursday, 2 days after opening, 1:30 in the afternoon. I was sitting in a fence row.
Well, that's your time, around noon.
Yeah, I love it. All these guys that go to lunch at noon and out to the bank and haul their deer in and making all kind of ruckus. You want to be sitting quiet, nice and quiet about noon.
Boy, this guy knows. Well, congratulations, Fred. You got quite a record for this season. That was it. Fred Hood's story. That rack was incredible. I really didn't think we'd beat it, but do you know what? On this Big Buck Night, we beat it twice. 2 scores larger than Fred Hood's. Now, of course, we go by the points plus spread for the score instead of using the traditional Boone and Crockett method. And a lot of people ask, why don't we score the Boone and Crockett method? Boone and Crockett requires about 15 minutes to score a rack because of all the measurements. I think you'll see why when we explain here in some tape that shows step by step how Boone and Crockett scoring is done. On a typical whitetail buck, for example, the lengths of both main beams are measured with a wire cable that's taped several places on the beam for alignment. An alligator clip goes square across the tip of the beam for accuracy, and the cable is then measured to the exact length. The length of both beams are added together, then the difference between them is subtracted. Added then is either the inside spread or the length of the longest main beam, whichever is less. Then the tines are marked and measured individually, added to the score, with the differences in matching tines subtracted. Now, if a point is abnormal and doesn't match a tine on a corresponding beam, it's subtracted unless the abnormal points total more than 12.5 inches, which means the rack will be scored as non-typical and get credit for those abnormal tines. Other measurements are taken, such as the tip-to-tip beam spread and the outside spread. Now, these don't figure into the actual scoring for the Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett totals. They're called miscellaneous data. But this next set of measurements does figure in. Now, these are taken very carefully They're the circumferences measured between the tines of each beam in 4 places. That's 8 numbers in all. Corresponding differences are subtracted, and it takes a good 15 minutes to score a rack this way. After all the mathematics are done, there's your score as recognized internationally. Well, you can see why for television I prefer the points plus spread. Now here's a rack, a nice rack on a buck. This would easily make it either way. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that qualifies for our Stroh's Award, the minimum for 10 points. Also, if we lay a tape across this rack, we easily have 18 inches right there. And by the way, any way you can get 18 inches. It doesn't have to be from beam to beam. It could be from one point to another. That will qualify. So either an 18-inch spread or 10 antler points will qualify. But you know, the thing is with the Boone and Crockett scoring method, and which we'll show you on our big buck finals coming up in March, the bucks that score highest in the Boone and Crockett method are the most symmetrical. And this is a very symmetrical rack right here. So we'll be checking that scoring system out in March. But you know, we've had a lot of weird deer on Big Buck Night. We had one, a number of years ago that only had 2 legs. 2 of its other legs were cut off by a mowing machine. We've had a deer with a mane, which happens now and then, almost like a horse or a pony, a little mane down the back of its neck. We've had an albino deer, which was on last year's show. You might remember that one, complete with pink eyes. Very unusual. You may have seen in the paper this year, 5-legged buck. Where was this 5th leg?
I got it out. I rolled him over, and we dragged him out of the woods. My brother and I was looking at it, and I rolled him over. I wanted to see where the bullet come out of him. I looked at it up on top of him. I thought, hell, that's weird. You know, it's well, most of them don't believe me right off the bat. I gotta have the proof, you know. Well, I was quite surprised when I rolled him over.
So you've got a taxidermist who's volunteered to mount the buck?
Yeah, I have. You know, if I could donate it to a museum someplace.
2 years ago, we had another incredible story on our show with Doc Kelly, who had to separate 2 monster bucks, 2 record book bucks that had their antlers locked. He cut the tine off of one, which is actually the bigger, the dominant buck, and they were both released. Now, a hunter later got the one buck, the one that wasn't the victor. The victor, we now have the antlers here, which Doc Kelly gave us. You can see the tine that was cut off. This is what he snipped off. If he hadn't cut this tine off, this would have been a record book buck, but it lost that deduction for these points. This deer was killed on the highway, as so many deer, more and more every year, are getting killed. We have, by the way, this rack, when we get our new museum put up in Bath, hopefully this coming year, we'll have this and a number of these other unusual deer that you've seen on this show on display. But the car kill deer is just increasing every year, becoming quite a problem. Of course, we don't have a category in our trophy book for deer taken by a car, but maybe we should. Look at this. A record book buck in its own right. Come on in here, Jan Smith, and you're from?
Boyne City, Michigan?
From Boyne City, where they grow the big bucks.
Well, yes, this
Now,
was out close to Walloon Lake.
do you hunt?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
But you do drive.
Yes, I do.
And Jan Smith got this buck with your car. This must have been a big boy.
Yes, he was. All I seen was deer and horns.
All over the front of your hood.
Yep.
How much was the bill on that?
Over $5,000.
$5,000 buck. Why didn't you have the whole thing mounted?
I was-
Golly. You don't want to spend any more
No,
money. Boy,
no, really.
that's quite devastating. But look at the size of this rack. I doubt if many people, including you, have ever seen a buck this size. What, were you driving through a swamp or something? This looks like a swamp buck.
There's a lot of swamp area there.
Man, look how dark that is. So when was this?
September 26th, about 8:30 at night.
You were going the speed limit and all?
Yes, I was going the speed limit.
And you were just, everything looked normal? And
Everything looked normal, and all of a sudden, just split second, deer horns, and bang.
Wow, that is something else. Well, this scores. You scored, by the way, 42 3/8 with your points plus spread. Wow, aren't you excited?
Yes, I am.
Well, I tell you, I'm glad that you made it safely and there was no injury in this deer.
Yes, wear your seat belts.
Yeah, very good. Well, good advice. I guess all we can say is congratulations on the deer, Jan.
Thank you.
That's a great story, even though it was taken with a car. Great. Now, Mike McCachran has a story that is almost as strange, maybe stranger in some ways. Come on in here, Mike, than that five-legged deer. I mean, this looks to be almost a perfect 8-point buck. I mean, really nice rack. You were hunting up in the Upper Peninsula.
Right,
You saw this buck, right?
right.
Tell the story.
Well, when I first seen it, it was about 65 yards away, and it was running. It was on a dead run. And I noticed there was something different about it, but it didn't click. I just seen antlers, and I wanted a buck. I shot, got the deer, walked up, went to field dress it, and noticed it was a doe. And when I started looking at it then, I noticed it had a long, skinny nose and a long, skinny neck. The neck wasn't swelled up like a buck and rut. And it was a shocker is what it was.
A shocker. I guess
Yeah.
so. Well, you know, most does that we've heard about that have antlers, which is an aberration that happens every year, they're almost always in velvet.
Correct.
And
That's
this
what
one,
I've heard.
This one appears to be totally polished.
Yeah, she'd been rubbing them on trees because there's bark embedded in her antlers.
I'll be darned. Now, any idea whether she was looking for a buck or looking for a doe, or a buck was looking for her, or what?
I'm not going to guess. I'm not
Just
going to
no
guess.
clues.
No clues. She was by herself, or he was by herself. It was by itself.
I see. We don't know if this was a doe with antlers or a buck with not what it should have or just what the deal was. What a story, though. You have a trophy for the wall.
I sure do.
Whatever it is, congratulations.
Thank you.
A great story. Here we have a buck that scores 37 and a half, 11 antler points. Come on in here, John Vetter from Galesburg. 11 antler points, 26 and a half inch spread. Now, the phenomenal thing about this buck is that you took it with a handgun.
Yep.
What caliber?
It's a 44 Magnum Ruger Red Hawk with a Leopold scope on top of it.
Have you been hunting with a handgun long?
No, this is actually my first year with a handgun.
Oh, terrific. So far, the biggest buck taken with a handgun this year in our state. That is a tremendous rack. Nearly symmetrical, except it has one extra point on this side.
Yep.
So what was the story behind it? Where were you hunting? In a cornfield? You were down in southern
No,
Michigan?
I was hunting the swamp, and I was walking through, trying to be as quiet as I could, and all of a sudden he just got him napping or something, because he just stood up in this big hunk of shumac, and I pulled up and shot. And
Wow. What a heck of a rack. Have you taken other bucks before?
yes, I have.
So,
Nothing like this.
Nothing like this. I would guess, and the thing is, this man waited until 2 days before the end of the season. 28th of November, you were pressing it. Tremendous buck, though.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that. Your handgun.